English translation, 462nd contact Saturday, 5th of April 2008, 13:32 hours.
Be greeted and welcome, dear friend. I have just telephoned Bernadette about a mistake that was corrected in lowercase.
Also my greetings to you, Edward, dear friend. I am glad to see you well.
Now again, yes. I was lying flat when on the phone with Bernadette because I was not feeling well.
Did you not follow Florina's instructions?
Yes, I did, but my heart valve just keeps giving me trouble. But that does not mean that I need your help in this matter. You know how I feel about it.
Even if I feel the need to help you, I will stick to your wish.
Thanks. On the 1st of April, Quetzal was here. So together we were able to correct the statutes and a sentence from the statutes to the new circumstances regarding the administrative group. Florina was also here again some time ago, when Engelbert was in such poor health. He has been better since then, and he too is following her instructions.
I know that, and it is good that you both follow her instructions. For my part, I will also suggest to Engelbert those things which Florina has instructed him to do through you, in the same wise. Have you got the deductions for Quetzal from what you corrected?
I will bring you the proofs later. I have to pick them up from Bernadette's. Engelbert will act on your word, I am sure. But look here, I have a DVD that Michael Horn sent to Christian Freener. We watched it together. Christian has reservations about the recordings, which also applies to me. Look here, the DVD is entitled Capturing the Light, 30,000 Feet of Proof. In my opinion, the woman who made these recordings is schizophrenic because she claims to receive messages from some beings. But the whole thing is probably based on voices she hears in her schizophrenia. Christian is of the same opinion. And the recordings of the lights she made are, in my opinion, not based on beam ships or bioorganic flying objects, and therefore not on rods either. Also, it is not about earthquake lights or atmospheric phenomena, etc., but in my opinion, it is about staged photographs with light bodies, but also photographs of the moon, etc. Then there are many more images that consist of various light paths, exactly as Dr. Jonas from Vienna made them before my eyes, and claimed that they were ghost images, and the like. A man from Munich took the same pictures. He also had a doctorate. The pictures were taken by photographing standing light sources of different colors in the darkness, in such a manner that the camera aperture was left open, and the camera was moved slightly back and forth during the long shot. With Dr. Jonas, I also observed that he closed the camera aperture again, but only to open it again for further exposures with other light sources, thus creating double and triple exposures. And exactly such shots with exactly the same light strip figures can be seen on the DVD. Similar pictures with light strip figures are also created when lights in motion and vehicles with their headlights, etc., are photographed during long exposures in the dark. Now I would like, if you have time, that you look at this DVD on my computer, and then tell me what you think about it.
I would like to do that. If you set it up for me?
It will be quick. The computer's running and the disk is already in. So, there it begins. For my part, I have to run over to the bathroom, and then I also check the prints at Bernadette's. One more question. I was asked again about the thing with Christoph Blocher. After all, he was ostracized from the Federal Council by a party conspiracy, as you said. But the same conspiracy also led to the election of a new federal councillor, namely Evelyn Widmer-Schlumpf. I was asked what you think of this appointment to the Federal Council.
The whole machinations were based on a party conspiracy, as I already explained on the 7th of March. This conspiracy by various parties deprived Christoph Blocher of his office as federal councillor, which was in no wise right, because the whole thing was a party agreement that no democratic traits in any wise, as is always the case with party agreements. The parliamentarians who removed Christoph Blocher from office thus acted against the rules of democracy as a result of the agreement. It happened also that the woman was appointed as the new federal counselor by the party conspiracy, so that the whole thing did not correspond to a democratic election, just as the exclusion of Christoph Blocher happened in the same undemocratic way. Mrs. So the whole thing with the deposition was not a democratic ballot, nor was the appointment of the new federal counselor, but rather it was a concerted intrigue by certain parties, which meant that the new federal counselor held her office unjustly. Those are the logical facts,
which I believe all sincere, impartial, and just humans must see and judge equally. But those who see things differently, I think, are not disposed to the truth, blinded by the lie, biased, and incapable of making a neutral assessment of the whole.
There is no doubt about that.
Then I will leave now, so you can watch the DVD in the meantime. Took a little longer than I thought, because I got held up. Bernadette prepares the prints you want, and then puts them in my living room where I can get them for you. I see you have obviously seen enough of the DVD already, otherwise you would not be dealing with the magazine. What do you think about what the woman says and about the photos and films?
The 20 minutes I spent on it, I can only judge in the sense that you have done it yourself. The woman herself suffers from schizophrenic hallucinations or sensory delusions in relation to her hearing voices, which are not based on reality. In addition, she succumbs to a need for recognition, which she tries to conceal by deliberately falsely stating the opposite. The proof in this respect can be found in the fact that she has shown her evidence films and evidence photos around in order to attract attention. If she were not in need of validation, she would not have done so, just as she would not have taken the photographs, which in fact look very much like lights being positioned, partly moved and filmed in the dark. And those sequences which you call light strip figures are undoubtedly the same as those which were partly faked in your presence by Dr. Jonas from Vienna and the man from Munich. I have very fond memories of these pictures, so I can define the pictures of the woman taken without a doubt as the same kind. I find it regrettable that so-called experts got involved in the matter, which gives a completely wrong impressions about the whole thing.
So the case is clear. And while we are on the subject of unpleasantness, I would like to ask you if you know a little bit more today about the Tibet-China thing, by which I mean the Olympic torch relay, which is supposed to go through several countries of the world, and even to Mount Everest. I could imagine that the Tibetans in exile and their followers and those of the Dalai Lama will demonstrate against it worldwide.
This corresponds to the reality, because through the Dalai Lama's false propaganda and his political and religious machinations, a great many humans are being incited and misled with regard to his real intentions and the reality of what is happening in Tibet and its context. Thus, many innocent people are being misled about the reality of things regarding China and the Olympics, causing riots, crying for Olympic boycotts, fisticuffs, being incited to other violence and demonstrations, and tarnishing the apolitical spirit of the Olympics. So all those of low intelligentum and ignorant people who take part in it, similar to 1980, make the Olympics a political cause and thus jeopardize the peaceful and people's uniting sense and purpose of the Olympic Games, which has nothing to do with politics and which must remain excluded in any case. What is therefore being demonstrated against China throughout the world has nothing to do with the Olympic Games. And so the demonstrations by Tibetans in exile and their supporters and those of the Dalai Lama must not be used for political purposes. The Olympics must remain unaffected by this, because only that is right, and therefore boycotts, riots, fights, destruction, and other Gewalt, and demonstrations of all kinds against the games and the participation of athletes in them are illegal and contrary to the Olympic spirit.
I see it likewise so. You bring it to the point. The Dalai Lama's machinations regarding his claim to power over Tibet and its aspired independence from China is a purely political matter and has nothing to do with the Olympics in China. The fact that he is nevertheless deceitfully politically inciting his believers and other followers against China and the Olympics is something that they obviously do not realize, nor do all those government incompetent rulers who hype him up and see him as a saint. These rulers are so much of low intelligentum and dim-witted that they think they can bask in his spirituality and shine with it, not realizing that they are shaking hands with a wolf in sheep's clothing, as you called him. As a clergyman, he is hypocrisy itself, and what he has to do politically with China is his business alone, for it is he alone among all Tibetans who claims spiritual and political might for Tibet. So, from his side, the whole thing is only a primitive claim to power, through which he is at loggerheads with China, which in turn exerts evil violence in Tibet, with the Tibetans, and indeed also the supposedly peaceful monks, exerting counter-violence. This violence is also exercised by the Dalai Lama. Even if he does it deceitfully through the believers and other followers he has misled, who leave their blood or are otherwise harassed or punished, while not a hair on his head is touched. But this should not distract from the fact that China, just like the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans, also commits evil mistakes and spreads fear, terror, horror, and death through evil violence, only that China does it openly and thus infuriates the world, while the Dalai Lama remains unscathed through his nasty, deceitful machinations. Because officially, nothing can be proven against him, since he only preaches peace in public, but sows misguidance and violence in the background.
His believers and other followers do not want to see or know the real truth. Contrary to this, however, all the evils of the Chinese machinations are exploited in such a way that through it worse hatred arises and more is destroyed than made good. So that also China could learn and become peaceful and get rid of its human inhumanities and its Gewalt. Or, in addition, by the riots, demonstrations, and by the other violence and by the destruction of those who only rise against China in hatred, vindictiveness, and enmity, every chance is destroyed.
I am also thinking of the United States, where there will probably be riots and demonstrations and Olympic boycotts by those of low intelligentum and the uninitiated. This in a country that has enough dirt on its own and spreads terror and death worldwide through its secret services, just as the U.S. forces do, thinking only of Iraq, Afghanistan and Guantanamo, etc. Yet this is probably not being heard from China haters around the world, because the U.S. reign of terror is taboo, because many states in the world depend on them and are too cowardly to openly share the truth. Low intelligentum, dim-wittedness, belief and dependence as well as cowardice are unfortunately very much the property of many humans, and cannot be remedied because understanding, intellect, and rationality are missing for this. If peace, freedom, and harmony are to one day arise on the earth, then a radical rethinking must take place, which must be free from lack of love, hatred, vengeance, revenge, retaliation, deception, belief, terror, and Gewalt, as well as from striving for power and profit, etc.
I can only agree with that. But what I want to say now, a translation of the Goblet of the Truth into English, should only be done according to good English British written language, but not according to American English, because the American language is completely unsuitable for this important work. Although the English language is generally characterized by deficiency in comparison with German verbal and written language, British English is still more acceptable in comparison with American English and of a kind that can be described as cultivated. It is a pity. However, that the book has to be translated into other languages at all, because much is lost through every translation into other languages, which can only be expressed correctly in the German language. Also, the code cannot be transferred into other languages. And if the book is published in foreign languages, then the original German text must be included, as already determined by Nocodemion.
That goes without saying. Translations are quite expensive, however, so I have set up a special bank account for the appeal for donations made for this purpose, so that the costs can first be collected for an English translation. I have spoken to you before about the fact that the Goblet of the Truth could be translated by Rebecca, which you said would be fine if she was suitable.
That is correct, but in this respect you first have to clarify exactly whether she can really do the translation in the desired framework with regard to British English. If that is the case, then there is probably nothing to be said against it, if she is also up to the task in all other necessary areas. However, I do think, because I have thought it through again, that a special expert should translate the work after all. It is up to you, however, to bring in the necessary clarifications in this regard, because we, for our part, do not want to and must not interfere in these matters. If the clarifications show that Rebecca does not meet the necessary requirements, which I now assume she does, then you would have to find someone else to do the translation work. A professional translation into the British English language of the Goblet of the Truth is of great importance and must be guaranteed under all circumstances, which may be difficult for Rebecca. For other translation work, however, she is well suited and educated enough so that she should have no difficulties with this. The Goblet of the Truth is, however, something special and not an everyday occurrence, for we consider it to be the most valuable book ever published on the earth. Accordingly, the accuracy of its translation into other languages is of the utmost importance.
That is difficult, then, because I think that this work can only be done by a certified translator who is also adept at British English expressions and forms of writing, and is well versed in them at a high level, to translate everything fairly in the wise that all forms are given in the book. The cost of translation also plays an important role, because we have to bring them together.
I understand all that, but really the extensive task for these things is in your hands. However, a reasonable remuneration for the translation work must be a condition, so I will look around to find out something about it, so that I can then comment on the fee for the translation.
We will do our best to clarify and arrange everything. And I think it is good that you want to make an effort to clarify the translation fees, because then you can help us in an advisory capacity.
I feel the need to do this so that I can help you in an advisory capacity.
It will really help us. May I ask you something else regarding, because I only know your explanation, which you gave me some time ago. I do not want to talk about it openly, so it should not appear in the conversation report.
I cannot give you any news about that, because nothing has changed in the matter. So everything is going as I explained it to you.
Thank you. Your answer is sufficient, because I only wanted to know if something new has arisen in the matter.
That is not the case, no. But now, Edward, dear friend, our conversation must be over for today because I must resume my duties. Goodbye, dear friend.
Take care, my friend, and once again,